The name on the map was a lie, not a malicious lie, not the kind that gets whispered in a palace or scrawled in a secret letter. Something quieter, and in many ways more dangerous, the kind of lie told so many times by so many different mouths that it eventually becomes the only truth anyone knows. For more than 2,000 years, the people who lived in this land did not call it Persia. They never called it Persia. In their oldest languages, in the inscriptions chiseled into stone before Rome had risen from the dirt, in the poetry that predated every European civilization that would one day write about them, this land had a name: Iran. The word comes from something even older, Arya or Arya, a term meaning noble, free man. From this root came Aryanam, the land of the Aryan people. Shortened, worn smooth by centuries of use, it became simply Iran. This was not a political invention. It was not constructed by a king or decreed by a court. It was the organic name of a civilization, what a people call themselves when no one is watching. But then came the Greeks. Herodotus, the father of Western history, and perhaps the father of Western misunderstanding, arrived on these shores with a different vocabulary. He observed the southwestern province of Persia, the homeland of the ruling dynasty, the particular place from which Cyrus the Great had launched his world-changing ambitions. And so, with the efficient arrogance of an outsider naming what he barely understood, Herodotus called the entire empire Persis. The name traveled west, into Greek texts, into Roman records, into the medieval imagination of Europe. It moved from scholar to scholar, map to map, empire to empire, compounding, calcifying, becoming more real with every repetition. By the time European powers arrived to divide the world between themselves, Persia was the only name they recognized. And recognition in the age of empire was the first step toward ownership. By the early 1900s, Iran existed as a country in name only. It had a government, it had a king, the weak, hollow remnant of the Qajar dynasty. It had a flag, it had borders, but what it did not have, in any meaningful sense, was sovereignty. Two empires had seen to that. In 1907, Britain and Russia signed the Anglo-Russian Convention. On paper, it was a diplomatic agreement. In practice, it was a dissection. Russia would dominate the north. Britain would control the south. The Persian government, a supposed sovereign state, was not consulted. It was simply divided, like an estate carved up between two heirs who did not bother to ask the tenants their opinion. In 1901, a British businessman named William Knox Darcy had negotiated a 60-year concession from the Qajar government, exclusive rights to all oil and natural gas across most of the country. In exchange, a small percentage of profits, a sum of money, and a handshake with a dynasty too weak to refuse. Oil was discovered in 1908. A year later, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born. By the 1910s, the British government owned 51% of that company, ensuring a direct supply of fuel for the Royal Navy. The Russians held the north with different tools, commercial monopolies, loans at predatory interest, military advisors embedded in Persian institutions, a stranglehold on kerosene, the fuel that lit Iranian homes, cooked Iranian food, and heated Iranian winters. Every lamp that burned in the north burned on Russian terms. The mechanisms were different. The effect was identical. A country that bled its own resources into foreign treasuries. A government perpetually indebted. A people working their own land for someone else's profit. The Persian government protested, occasionally, carefully. with the voice of a man who knows the person he's arguing with has a gun on the table. And the gun was always on the table. This was the world into which Reza Khan was born. He was born in 1878 in the province of Mazandaran. His name was Reza Khan. No title, no inheritance, no noble lineage in the Western sense. Just a boy from a military family who joined the Persian Cossack Brigade and discovered, early and with absolute clarity, what he was good at: commanding, organizing, making men afraid enough to follow. In February 1921, Reza Khan marched on Tehran. There was no great battle, no dramatic siege. The Qajar establishment simply yielded. Because when a man with total conviction moves against men with no conviction at all, the outcome is rarely in doubt. He became Minister of War, then Prime Minister. And then, in 1925, the Majlis, the Persian parliament, declared him Shah. The Qajar dynasty, which had spent a century selling Iran piece by piece, was finished. A new dynasty had begun, the Pahlavis, and the man who built it had exactly one obsession: dragging Iran into the modern world before the modern world consumed it entirely. What followed was a modernization campaign of staggering speed and ferocity. The Trans-Iranian Railway, a project that connected the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf, cutting through some of the most geologically unforgiving terrain on Earth, was built under his command. A national bank was established. A secular civil code replaced religious law. Western-style education replaced clerical schooling. The University of Tehran opened its doors. He conscripted a national army. He broke the power of regional warlords and nomadic chieftains who had operated as parallel governments for centuries. He weakened the Shia clergy that had functioned as the other state within a state. In 1936, he banned the veil, not through social persuasion, not through a campaign, through mandate. Police were ordered to physically remove the chador from women who wore it in public. This was modernization, as he understood it, not an invitation, but a command. His model was explicit. He admired Mustafa Kemal Atatürk in Turkey, a man who had dismantled an old empire and forged a secular republic from its ruins. Reza Shah wanted Iran to do the same, rapidly, ruthlessly, without apology. But there was something beneath the modernization, something more personal. Reza Shah did not simply want Iran to be modern. He wanted Iran to be Iranian, not the Iran that European maps described, not the weak colonial remnant that foreigners had named, divided and drained. Something older, something that pre-existed the Greeks and their maps, something that pre-existed the Arab conquests, the Mongol invasions, the long humiliation of the Qajar era. He looked at history, deep history, and found a foundation he believed could hold the weight of a new nation. Ancient Persia, pre-Islamic, Achaemenid, monumental, and he built his ideology of nationalism on top of it. While Reza Shah was constructing a new Iran, something was being constructed in Germany. It began, as many catastrophic ideas do, with language. In the 19th century, European linguists made a genuine, significant discovery. They traced the family tree of languages: Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Persian, German, English, and found a common ancestor. They called it Proto-Indo-European. They also found a word that appeared in various forms across these ancient languages: Arya, noble, free. It was a linguistic observation, a fact about grammar and vocabulary. But science, when handed to those who need a weapon, rarely stays science for long. In 1933, a political movement took control of Germany that had been searching for exactly this kind of raw material. The Nazis took the word Aryan, this linguistic term, this archaeological fragment of ancient vocabulary, and transformed it into the central pillar of a pseudoscience, so violent in its implications that it would eventually kill millions. Aryan no longer meant a language family. It now meant a race, a blood category, a biological designation of superiority and inferiority. The Aryan was the master, the creator of civilization. Nordic, Germanic, blonde-haired and pure, everyone else, and this is where the word became a murder weapon, was not. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws codified this into legal reality. The Aryan paragraph had already been stripping Jews from civil service since 1933. The architecture of systematic exclusion was being built methodically in plain sight. The word Aryan had become, in its Nazi incarnation, functionally synonymous with not Jewish. It was the photographic negative of hatred, defined not by what it was, but by what it excluded. A linguistic term for a language group had become a biological tool for genocide, and Iran was watching. More specifically, Reza Shah was watching. Here was the question that no one at the time wanted to ask plainly, and that historians have argued about ever since. When Reza Shah looked at Nazi Germany's ideology of Aryan supremacy, did he see a threat, or did he see an opportunity? March 21, 1935, Nowruz. The Persian New Year, the oldest unbroken holiday on earth. A festival of fire and spring and the turning of the cosmic wheel, practiced before Zoroaster named it and before Islam arrived to reshape it. On this particular Nowruz, Reza Shah Pahlavi issued a decree. Simple, brief, final. The decree instructed foreign governments, all of them, to stop using the name Persia. The country's name, in all official international correspondence, would henceforth be Iran. Not a request, a correction. On the surface, this was straightforward historical rectification. The name Persia had always been a foreign imposition, a Greek misidentification that hardened into colonial habit. The name Iran was what the people had always called their own land. The change was not invention. It was restoration. This is the clean, defensible version of the story, and it is true, but history is rarely satisfied with the clean version because the timing speaks. 1935 was not a random year to make this announcement. 1935 was the year the Nuremberg laws were passed in Germany. 1935 was the height of Nazi ideology's expansion. 1935 was a year in which the word Aryan and its political implications were dominating European political conversation. And Reza Shah, who had built his entire nationalist program around Iran's pre-Islamic ancient identity, understood exactly what that word meant. Iran, derived from Ayanam, land of the Aryan people. The linguistic connection was not invented by the Nazis, and Reza Shah did not need to invent it either. It existed in the historical record. It was academically documented. Iranian scholars had written about it. German scholars had written about it. What changed in 1935 was what the word Aryan now meant in the most powerful political context on earth. German diplomatic response to the name change was warm. Germany had been cultivating relationships across the Middle East, looking for strategic allies and commercial partners. Iran, with its oil, its geographic position, and its nationalist government, was an attractive prospect. And now here was Reza Shah, on the most symbolically charged day of the Iranian calendar, issuing a decree that reminded the world, "We are the original Aryans." Was this a deliberate signal to Berlin? Most historians are careful. They say the name change was primarily about nationalism, about cultural reclamation, about distancing Iran from its colonial image. And they are right, but they also note that the timing was not coincidental, that Reza Shah's government was simultaneously deepening trade relationships with Germany throughout the 1930s. That Iran and Germany had signed a significant trade agreement in 1935, the same year as the decree. That German engineers and technicians were working on Iranian infrastructure projects. That Tehran's newspapers reported on Nazi Germany with a notable absence of condemnation. Reza Shah was not a Nazi, let that be clear. He did not adopt Nazi ideology. He did not implement racial laws. The Jews of Iran were not persecuted under his reign, but he was a pragmatist who understood the value of symbols. He understood that words carry freight, political, cultural, historical freight. He had spent his entire reign choosing symbols carefully. The railway, the uniform, the secular courts, the band veil. Every decision was a statement. And in 1935, changing the country's international name to Iran, the land of the Aryans, while the most powerful political movement in Europe was built upon a theory of Aryan supremacy, was not, in any meaningful sense, a coincidence. It was an alignment, coded, deniable, and perfectly timed. In August 1941, Britain and the Soviet Union invaded Iran. The official reason was Reza Shah's supposed Nazi sympathies, his refusal to expel German nationals from the country, his balancing act between Berlin and the Allies. Whatever his private calculations had been, they had failed. He abdicated in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He was taken first to the island of Mauritius, then to South Africa. He died in Johannesburg in 1944, 3 years into an exile he would never leave. The man who had tried to end foreign domination of Iran had been removed from power by foreign domination of Iran. But the name remained, Iran. Every government that came after kept it. The constitutional monarchy, the Islamic Republic, every successor to Reza Shah's decree accepted without debate the correction he had made. Because whatever else it was, political signal, nationalist declaration, coded message to a rising European darkness, it was also simply the truth. The people had always called it Iran. They were at last being listened to. History is full of names that did not belong to the people who bore them. The Congo, named by a Portuguese explorer for a local kingdom he barely understood. Rhodesia, named for a British colonizer. Persia, named for a Greek who saw one province and called it the whole. These are not innocent mistakes. Names are architecture. They shape how the world sees a place, how a place sees itself. Who controls the story? When Reza Shah changed the name, he changed the story. Not just the diplomatic correspondence, not just the postal addresses, the story. The way the world would reach for a word when it thought about this land. What associations that word would carry. What history it would invoke. Persia invoked carpets and poets and spice routes, beautiful things but filtered through a European lens. The Orientalist fantasy, the exotic, passive, decorative East. Iran invoked something older and more assertive, a civilization that named itself, a people who had always known who they were. And yet, the darker shadow of 1935 does not simply dissolve because the history is complex. Reza Shah made this declaration in a year when Aryan was a word being weaponized in Europe for mass murder. He made it in a year when his government was deepening ties with the regime that wielded that weapon. He made it as a man who had spent his entire political career understanding that symbols can be tools and signals simultaneously. He may not have intended to ally himself with Nazi ideology, but he chose his timing. And timing in politics is never accidental. Words carry the weight of everyone who has ever used them. Arya was used by the ancient peoples of the plateau to describe their highest aspiration, noble, free, belonging to no one but themselves. It was used by 19th-century linguists to describe a family of languages. It was used by 20th-century murderers to justify a hierarchy of human worth that led to industrial genocide. It was used by Reza Shah to reclaim a name, to signal, to assert. It is used today on the passport of every Iranian citizen in the name of the country itself. One word, one root, 4 histories, and none of them cancel out the others.